Hi, this is Scott Garibay. Count it all joy, brothers and sisters of the icosahedron. All right, today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. We are specifically going to talk about the Dungeons and Dragons VTT, which was talked about in the 2023 Spring D&D Direct. Okay, so D&D Directs are big deals, big freaking deals. Like, they get millions of views. And they are functioning. I didn't know this. I think Nintendo does a Nintendo Direct, and maybe, what D&D was structured after that. I heard that. I'm not sure if that's the case or not. But D&D Direct is the best communication we have ever seen on Dungeons and Dragons, ever, bar none. Right? It is really phenomenal. And so there was this entire section on the D&D virtual tabletop, and I want to talk to you today about the virtual tabletop. And this VTT, this 2023 Spring D&D Direct video that I'm bringing you is actually only happening because of a comment by one of my commenters who goes by the tag August, okay? And August said, hey, was responding to one of my OSR videos and said, oh, hey, the OSR is not that powerful, that the way you're thinking, and then it's okay. All right, this is not August, but this is my impression of an aggregate of many OSR responders. They all, I get so many OSR commenters coming in, and they're like, Scott, let us elucidate you. We assure you, the OSR is as meaningless and disorganized and fractured and confused as it ever was. And we're not going to be powerful or real competitors for Dungeons and Dragons. We're going to be useless the way we've always been useless. Just low copy energy nonsense. We'll continue the way it always has. And there's no OSR general. There's no OSR king. We're as disorganized and as fractured and as absolutely meaningless as we've always been. Right? I'm like, no, you are no, that is not correct, right? Like, that was the case before February 2023, and then Kelsey Dion showed up, right? And she's and here's the thing, right? They're 100% right? The OSR was filled with low heart, low vision, low stakes creators, right? Who were like, oh, like Kevin Crawford, let me make this worlds without numbers. Let me, the OSC creator, Jason Bowman with Pathfinder, right? The creator of DCC, right? Like, and they're like, oh, we'll just copy Dungeons & Dragons, slap it on, down, and keep moving, right? No real innovation in any of the rules, and no real stakes on a game or any. And let's always make sure that the OSR is a haven for the prejudice, right? Like, and Kelsey Dion is like, no, you can check all that noise. It's all done, baby. This is a real game. Look at this, right? Like, she's like, OSR, black and white art, looks like an OSR game, right? Also, highly deadly. Character's going to die quickly, right? Also, low equipment, low magic. OSR. But guess what? If you're prejudiced, you can check that noise at the gate. This is OSR with a progressive engine in it. I tore the old hatred prejudice engine out, and I replaced it with a progressive engine, right? And I also took out all your crusty old slapdash copy energy rules mechanics, and I put in a new, actually innovative suspension. There are things that happen there are actually rules mechanics that you look at that and you go, that's really innovative. I've never seen that in anything else, right? And the other thing is, this ain't some scrub designer waltzing in from her garage, right? Kelsey Dion, do you know who she mentored under? She's got work under Index Card RPG, Blood and Snow, okay? You best recognize Index RPG is the best indie that has ever been written, right? Ingrid Bernal has forgotten more about tabletop role-playing game design than some of the people who work at WotC. Like he is the Magic Johnson of tabletop role-playing game design. He is absolutely incredible. And Kelsey Dion was sharpening her fangs and teeth, right? Her fangs and claws under Ingrid Bernal 4 or 5 years ago, man. This is not a coincidence, right? And she is the new OSR king, right? Done, settled, right? Like, so this OSR person comes in and says, "Oh, Scott, OSR is not even going to be around two years from now, and the reason why is the VTT will come out, and once the VTT comes out, everybody's doomed," right? And I'm like, so one, okay, if I seem sarcastic to August, sorry, I'm not sarcastic to August. I am being sarcastic to the aggregate OSR responders, right? And I really, think that, this idea that, like, and all of this is coming from the idea that the 2023 OGL crisis, the 2023 Manic Panic, did not change the entire tabletop role-playing game industry forever, which is a ludicrous, laughable, ridiculous stance. Okay, the OSR will never be the same again. It's got a king, and it's never had a king. Never, right? Like, and Shadow Dark will be the first OSR game ever that matters, and that is important, right? And it's emerging out of the smoke from the flames of the 2023 Manic Panic to pick up where every other OSR designer absolutely failed. Okay, let me stay focused. All right. D&D so August, this OSR commenter comes in and says, "Hey, none of this is going to matter. Once the VTT drops, everybody's doomed," right? And guess what? This is a very commonly held opinion, right? I could tell you a few other people who are absolutely, first of all, OSR people are terrified about the VTT because they're like, "Oh my gosh, when there's an official Dungeons & Dragons virtual tabletop, who on earth is going to play my copy energy nonsense? I'm struggling to get anybody to play it now," right? And so they're very frightened of it. The most frightened tabletop role-playing game the most frightened OSR commentator today is Professor Dungeon Master. He is very afraid of the VTT, right? He's like, "Oh, the VTT, it's going to ruin things. It's going to ruin D&D. Oh, it's terrible, blah, 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 blah." Right? And honestly, I feel really like, I'm old. I'm 53 years old, right? But I'm aware of like every week I got to talk to a blue hair, and they're like, "Oh, I can't get this medicine. Oh, my back hurts." Dude, man, like be aware. Like talk like, and I feel really bad because I think Professor Dungeon Master is a really relevant person and has a lot of cool ideas, but he's sliding right into that, octogenarian isn't the right number, but that like geriatric, like, "Oh, I hate everything new," or and I'll tell you, I'm mourning the loss of him. All right, like you just go over there and he's like, "Oh, look at this crusty, D&D copy game that I, with a bunch of minis," and me saying why everything new in D&D is bad. And his channel didn't used to be like this. He didn't used to be like this. It's like he surrendered. And I miss him. All right. So everybody's afraid of the VTT, the D&D VTT. You do not need to be afraid of the VTT, the D&D VTT. And I'm going to explain why. So what is the D&D VTT, right? So I'm going to explain to you. This is Dungeons & Dragons Guardians confusion on technology and what they actually own. And this is not new. This has been around forever, right? So there is a brilliant book, which I've read cover to cover, and it's called The Art of Dungeons & Dragons. It came out recently, and it's a huge, stunning, like coffee table large, like 300-page, full-color volume. Came out about 2-3 years ago. And it's official D&D content, right? But there's actually a historic record in the book about about the art of Dungeons & Dragons. And one of the things they showed advertisements, right? Because there's art in ads, right? Like, even though it was only photographs, it's still art. Photographs are art, right? It's not painting or an illustration, but it's still art. And this got really interesting, right? So, and in that book, right, it was D&D talking about its own history, and they were like, D&D was massively confused about technology. And they show a picture from like the 90s, right, where this dude has one single CD, and he's like, every book I own is on this CD. And on the other hand, he's got this huge book, you know, a teetering pile of like 12 books, right? And it's like, which would you rather? Do you want this CD with all your books on it, or do you want these books, these heavy, you know, physical books, right? And when TSR made this advertisement, this was TSR making this advertisement, right? When they made this advertisement, they were like, hey, we make 95% of all our money on these physical books. Why don't we insult them and tell you to buy this thing that we might have 3 sales for already, right? Like, and there was massive confusion, right? And the reality is there's massive confusion around the D&D VTT, right? And there are a lot of people who I think there's a lot of people in Hasbro who are like, the VTT is the future of Dungeons & Dragons. It is a part of the future of Dungeons & Dragons, but it's not the key part of the future of Dungeons & Dragons. And here's why, okay? Who will play the Dungeons & Dragons VTT? D&D participants, okay? Now, what is a D&D participant? I'll tell you what one is. A critter. It's a perfect example. The average critter, in my humble opinion, has never sat at a D&D table, right? They have watched Matthew Mercer play Dungeons & Dragons for, and this is not a joke, literally 1,000 to 2,000 hours each, right? Now, that person is a D&D participant, and they have been massively helpful in getting us to where we are right now, right? But they are not a dungeon master, and they are not a Dungeons & Dragons player, okay? But they are D&D participants. It's the same thing with the D&D VTT, right? No dungeon masters are going to use the D&D VTT, right, for the majority of their great games. There will be real dungeon masters who run physical table D&D with physical books for 51% of their game. And as long as you do that, as long as you're running D&D physical table with physical books, you are a dungeon master, okay? If you are playing the D&D VTT, that's great. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that, okay? What you're doing is you're being a D&D participant. I am a dungeon master who also does the activities of a D&D participant, right? So Minecraft, that's a perfect example, right? I will play the Dungeons & Dragons Minecraft game when it comes out. That's D&D participation. That doesn't make me a dungeon master. That doesn't make me a D&D player. Nor does playing the D&D VTT make you a dungeon master or make you a D&D player, right? But it is massively important. And there may be, and I'll tell you right now, there are hundreds of millions of Minecraft players, right? There might be 500 million Minecraft players, right? If even a third of them play D&D, Minecraft, there'll be more D&D participant. There'll be more D&D Minecraft players than there are literal D&D players, right? They're all D&D participants. It's exactly the same with the D&D VTT. It's a wonderful, delightful way to participate in Dungeons & Dragons, but it's not Dungeons & Dragons. That doesn't mean it doesn't have value. It has incredible value, right? What's going to happen is people are going to go in and they're going to go, I'm a dungeon master, and I'm a Dungeons & Dragons player, and they're going to put on their hats, like, oh, look at me dungeon mastering with the VTT, right? Look at me playing with the VTT, right? Like, I'm a D&D player, I'm a dungeon master. That's cute, and it's fine, there's nothing wrong with you saying that. Like, you can tell yourself that all you want, right? But the reality is you're not playing D&D, right? You're not playing D&D on a VTT, right? So the reality is, but that's okay. And the reason why is many critters will come in and will spend 2, 3, 5 years. Some even, well, no, we're not there. Like, I think Critical Role is like 8 years old. There might be people who wait 10 years and watch literally thousands of hours. Who listen to over 1,000 hours of Critical Role and watch 2 seasons of Critical Role, right? Before they ever actually get to the table and become a real D&D player or become a real dungeon master, right? And that's okay, right? The D&D VTT is going to be a channel for people to learn what D&D is and then get to D&D later, right? And I'm convinced the path to Dungeons & Dragons will probably be people doing 5 to 10 years of D&D participation before they actually become a Dungeon Master and before they actually become a Dungeons & Dragons player. And they may come in and they may play with the Dungeons & Dragons. There could be a person who comes in and buys the D&D Lego set, puts together the Lego set, and plays with the minifigs as toys. That's D&D participation, right? And then when they become Dungeon Masters, all of those become official, become very, permissioned, in my humble opinion, Hasbro permissioned minifigs and terrain, right? And that can be used in real Dungeons & Dragons. And guess what? Learning about, and it's exactly the same thing with D&D VTT, right? When you as a player learn, oh, when I flank, I get this bonus. That's nice. That's cute that you learned it in the VTT. You were never playing Dungeons & Dragons, but when you sit next to your friend and you start to build friendships and you start to actually use Dungeons & Dragons for what it's used for, what its actual purpose is, which in my humble opinion is as a tool to explore identity, narrative, and language. That flanking, the fact that you know about flanking, that's going to be incredibly useful. That's going to be incredibly valuable. And so that's what the Dungeons & Dragons VTT is. There's no reason to be afraid of it. It's simply Dungeons & Dragons participation. The VTT does not make no one is, no one who comes in and plays the VTT or DMs or tells a story, is the main core referee with the VTT. That doesn't make them a Dungeon Master. That doesn't make them a player, right? No more than buying the Lego set and putting it together makes you a Dungeon Master, or it's simply D&D participation. None of that makes you a Dungeon Master. None of that makes you a Dungeons & Dragons player, right? But all of it is paving the road to you reaching the point where you are a Dungeon Master and you are a Dungeon & Dragon player. And all of that is incredibly valuable, and actually could not be more valuable, right? Unless it was actual D&D Prime, D&D Canon hardbacks, fizzy diges, right? Canon hardback or D&D fizzy diges. So every single word of that is my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to hear your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.